I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. Today is February 8th, 2023. Thank you all very much for joining me. I'm joined, as usual, by the Western Standard's opinion editor, Nigel Hannaford. How are you, Nigel?
Great to be here. Doing good.
And also joined by, sometimes nice to have, Western Standard senior Alberta columnist, Cory Morgan.
I'm somewhat happy to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got a somewhat good show for you today. Some work done by the Western Standard's, one of the Western Standard's reporters here in our Calgary bureau has found links between two NDP candidates, the Alberta provincial NDP candidates based in Calgary, and an anti-oil group, the Pembina Institute, which does kind of think tank work and whatnot against what they call the tar sands and various other evil Alberta industries like that. So some controversy ginned up about it. We're going to get into it as well. Miss Smith goes to Ottawa. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has finally met Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau face-to-face during the first ministers' meeting dealing with the ritual Canadian premiers begging Ottawa for healthcare dollars meeting. And hijinks ensue. Very interesting things. I'm sure you've all seen the handshake felt around the world by now. Funny things like that. We're also going to talk about this weird Chinese spy balloon that floated its way all the way across America. Some of you are probably wondering, why didn't the biggest military on the planet, in the history of the planet, just shoot down the balloon? It's a bit odd. We're going to talk about the kind of the bizarre response to the Chinese spy balloon from the Biden administration. Before we get going, though, I want to thank, or maybe Cory wants to thank, my favorite sponsor, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association.
Sure. I mean, if you own firearms, if you like using them for any sort of, like the name says, shooting sports, target shooting, hunting, collecting, it's really your business, whatever you want to do with firearms. You got a government that's coming after them, and the Canadian Shooting Sports Association is there for you, standing up to make sure you maintain those rights. And they offer all sorts of resources like any other association. I mean, if you own firearms, you really should be a member of them. All sorts of resources online, and
I think they've even got a confiscation insurance.
Ooh,
I'm not positive.
I gotta look into that.
I was talking to them, and either they were working on it or they have it. They have insurance for if the government tries to confiscate your guns.
Well, like most insurance, I hope you never need it, but it's an interesting...
But can you claim the confiscation insurance if the government says they're confiscating it, but you refuse to give them up?
Oh, well, then it starts getting convoluted. But
yeah.
Either way, we're going down a rabbit hole, but it is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association with Tony Bernardo running it, and they're a fantastic group. And if you own a firearm, you really got to be a member of them. It's affordable, and it's worth it. They're at the CSSA-CILA.org. Or as we always say, it's easy, just Google them, Canadian Shooting Sports Association, and you'll find your way right there.
Beautiful. Okay, well, we're going to turn to the story here. As I said, story done by the Western Standard's Jonathan Bradley, one of our reporters here in the Calgary Bureau. He did some work and found that two of their candidates, and forgive my pronunciation here, Samir Kayandi is the NDP candidate in Calgary Elbow, and Nagwan Al Guneed is the NDP candidate in Calgary Glenmore. These people have been nominated by the NDP to carry the NDP's banner in those constituencies in the next election. But both of them have worked for the Pembina Institute. Now, for those who don't know, the Pembina Institute is a think tank in Alberta that's it's kind of like our own homegrown anti-oil lobby here.
All green all the time.
Yeah, they refer to the oil sands as tar sands. So that's kind of the biggest litmus test right there. If you call them tar sands, there's probably a 95% chance you don't like them very much. And they do all sorts of stuff, trying to push governments to do things that are not pro-oil and gas. And they are funded in large measure by governments. They get money from Ottawa. At various times, they've gotten money from the city of Calgary under Nenshi. They got money from the province of Alberta under Redford. These guys get a lot of government money over at various times. So obviously, some NDP folks on Twitter not very happy about the story. Not that their candidates are affiliated with this anti-oil group, but that our reporter has made a deal of this at all. Now, the NDP have been going to lengths, and I think to their credit have somewhat succeeded in recruiting a better quality of candidate than they maybe had in 2015. The NDP were not expecting to win the 2015 election, and that's why you had, people, flipping burgers essentially or working as baristas elected into the government, and you can only build.
Drever was entertaining, though. I mean, you got to give it.
Yeah, and she was a nice lady.
She was nice.
I enjoyed
Genuine
her company. It's up to voters to decide what they want. I don't think it's a good idea if every politician has to have a PhD and have made millions of dollars. That's not necessarily a good thing. But we want a little bit of resume, I think, to people we're electing. The NDP have tried to, and they were kind of stuck with those people pretty much in 2019 because they were incumbents, and it's pretty messy to get rid of incumbents and not have them go against the leader. So this time they're making a concerted effort to try and get a higher caliber of candidates. Some of these people have impressive resumes. I think it's just more of an ideological question if this is a thing. I'll start with you, Nigel. Does this, how do you think this thing is going to play in Calgary? Because both the NDP and the Pembina Institute have dismissed this, saying, it's not anti-oil, we just support green energy.
Well, first of all, it would probably have been harder to find two NDP candidates who were not of that persuasion, right? I mean, this goes with the territory. To be fair, the Fraser Institute has informed a lot of conservative candidates. Mm-hmm. So it's no surprise that the NDP would go to the Pembina Institute because they are fundamentally an anti-oil organization. Mm-hmm. That is not the main point. The main point is that we need to know that the NDP is a fundamentally anti-oil organization, and that if you are working in the patch, if you make your money from if you live your life with the salaries you make from oil enterprise, pay your taxes, or if you are living on the flow down, the multiplier, other businesses that service the oil patch, the NDP is not going to be good for you. In fact, they're going to be bad for you. And when they had their turn before, they were not good for the energy industry. They tried to do a deal with the federal government. The federal government basically brushed them off. Remember all that, trying to buy the social license, and then when they had given everything away, including an emissions cap, the federal government did what it was going to do anyway. So, yeah, sure. These people, I bet if we go through the list, we'll find a lot who get on the Pembina Institute's distribution list. But that's the thing. The Pembina Institute is pushing an anti-oil industry point of view. They're entitled to do that. But we are entitled to know and put the NDP on the spot and say, is this what you really think? And do you really want what the Pembina Institute says it wants?
So, Cory, Nigel said that the NDP is fundamentally anti-oil. I wrestle with it. I mean, there's obviously elements of the NDP that are clearly anti-oil and gas. But, when the NDP was elected in 2015, no one was more surprised than them. And they were saddled with all these promises they made, like, royalty review, and they're like, shit, we are expected to do these things. And then they found out very quickly, even they knew they were bad ideas. So they kind of went through the motions of a royalty review and whatnot. And they did a bunch of things that were bad for the oil patch, emissions caps and carbon taxes and all this stuff that bought wonderful pats on the back from Justin Trudeau. But do you think it's fair to call because the NDP seem to walk this line where they're trying to take these kind of green anti-oil measures to make their base happy, but they weren't dumb. They know that the oil industry, gas industry is the golden goose in Alberta. You kill that, you can't afford any of the social programs. So they were trying to do maybe two different things at once. Do you think it's fair to call the NDP anti-oil?
I think in general still is fair. I mean, it's in their ideology. They're just trying to figure out how to walk that tightrope. And I mean, when you look at it, the overtly anti-oil was like Berman, the mistake when they, when Rachel Notley appointed her.
Well, there's no
in
mistake there.
any
She's
sort of
anti-oil.
position. Yeah, there's no, and Pembina really reflects that though, because them as an organization, I really have a distaste for them because they're disingenuous. I mean, the Sierra Club, you know what they're about. Eco Justice. Pembina Institute pretends to be, oh no, we're just a green organization. We support it. We just want it cleaner. No. In fact, they're a member of, I looked it up, that Strathmere group of 14 members, of which are the Suzuki Institute, Greenpeace. I mean, these guys are hardcore anti-oil. They're anti-nuclear. They are, as well, they tried intervening, shutting down in situ oil sands projects. So these are an anti-oil and gas organization that tries to cloak themselves as something else, and that bugs me. And they get donations from Shell and other companies following their ESG garbage, which is a separate discussion altogether, but it does make them the ideal sort for the NDP to tap. This is the kind of person you can put out there and say, no, I'm not anti-energy. I just want to be a little greener. I just want to make the world a little prettier, when in reality, underneath, they are just as vitriolic. But either way, I wouldn't say they're all anti-oil. I mean, Margaret McQuaid-Boyd really embraced some pragmatism when she got in there.
I wouldn't call her anti. I think she did things that were bad for the patch, but I don't think she was fundamentally anti-oil.
But they're going to have to watch what they're doing. Calgary Elbow, those big houses down there in Britannia, they weren't built, through hemp farms and windmills. That's energy bucks down there, so they best tread carefully.
One of the things that you've been quite emphatic about over the past few months is the link between the provincial NDP and the federal NDP. So when we say the NDP is anti-oil, what do we think of Jagmeet Singh and the leadership that he is giving to the entire national party, of which this is just a local branch office?
Yeah, they can't depart too far from the federal guidelines. That's another tightrope for them to walk. They're in a difficult position trying to win Alberta.
So I think it's fair to say I'm not sure it's fair to say the NDP is outright anti-oil. There are they can't be, because they've got union members and whatnot who support they at least need to get in the next election if they're to form a government or come anywhere close to it, who are working in the oil patch. But then there are, I'd say, very powerful groups within the NDP that are clearly against it. But this kind of thing, two candidates here who have worked for a anti-oil group like Pembina Institute. I don't know. How much traction do you think this kind of thing is going to get when there's, some kind of right-leaning candidate and, they say there are two genders? That's front page news. That's a big thing. And then, the leaders forced to either defend them or fire the candidates or something. Do you think this kind of thing is going to catch on and affect the NDP negatively? Because everybody knows, it's cliche to say by now, but it's quite true. Calgary is the battleground of this coming election. The NDP have got Edmonton sewn up. UCP have got pretty much everything outside the two big cities, with a few minor exceptions sewn up. It's going to be Calgary, and there's two Calgary candidates in ridings that are currently held by the UCP. Elbow, I can definitely see going NDP if things go their way. Glenmore, a little tougher to see. They won it by about a dozen or so votes in 2015, and that was with a Wildrose PC split. Glenmore, NDP are only taking Glenmore if the UCP are getting wiped out in Calgary. But bring this back to battleground Calgary. How big an effect do you think this kind of thing is going to have?
Well, I think it's got to have an effect, and it's got to be a measurable one. I'm not alarmed by people going out and talking, by the way, about two genders. At the time, people, I think, have had it with the woke gender bending and the woke everything else. Party leaders may have to make a decision as what they say, but ordinary voters are just going to say, it's the emperor's new clothes. Let's go back to, are these people going to be good for what I do? I depend on the oil patch. You clearly dismiss it. You also say things that are patently hard to defend, if not absolutely untrue, like men can have babies. I don't know whether that's true of these two particular individuals, but you brought in the gender statements. No, people are going to, as long as the UCP doesn't shoot itself in the head, then that's going to hurt them.
Well, Cord, do you think they're able to thread this needle, though? That because I think for a lot of people, the centrality of the oil industry and to a lesser extent agriculture in Alberta is not direct. People drilling and servicing rigs know it's direct. People who are engineers and buildings in downtown Calgary here, they know it. But people a step removed from it who are not in the industry, I feel like every step removed from it, it's getting weaker, and Albertans don't quite understand their personal interest in the success of the oil and gas industry. And these NDP candidates aren't coming out holding no more pipeline signs.
And that's been haunting Notley for some time. These guys aren't as overt or over the top like those past protests were, and I guess it depends on how it's played. I do think Calgary Elbow, at least localized with these particular candidates, this can hurt. That's a swing riding. Elbow can certainly go either way, but at best it's a center left. I mean, when Alberta Party took it, for example, that was a pragmatic, not a hard left candidate who took that. But likewise, they're just as happy to come in and take a very conservative candidate. So how they present themselves down there could really have an impact. And the taint of potentially, though, being anti-oil and gas can very much hurt, though, as I said. I mean, a lot of there's some very staunch or very involved energy people in that spot. But whether it's a game changer for the whole election...
there's also, drags along 4th Street there that are kind of hipster.
Oh, and there's champagne socialists who don't understand where that money came from in the first place.
I'm not sure how much this hurts them there, because they're not holding no more pipeline signs. They're just, going to be able to kind of pass it off, flow it off as Pembina and NDP did here, and just saying, we're just trying to find green solutions to make the world better.
Part of it will be making this disappear. If they don't have to address it, then they can probably get away with it. But if they come out and say, no, I'm fully for oil and gas, well, they will lose that 4th Street bunch.
Well, so far the Western Standard, as far as I know, the only media that's touched this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like the CBC and the Herald and the Sun are touching this yet.
No, so the ball's kind of in their court right now. And as Nigel says, as long as the UCP doesn't blow it up, I mean, if they don't overplay it as well and so on, they can use that as a little bit of a knife to twist, but it's not a break the party sort of a issue yet either. So we'll see.
Okay. Well, we're going to move on to Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. Just traveled to Ottawa. I think she just came back from Ottawa now, and she met there. She was there for the first ministers' meeting, where every few years the premiers, actually every single year, the premiers get together on their own, and every single year they beg Daddy Ottawa for more healthcare money, seeming to forget that Ottawa's not supposed to have anything to do with healthcare under the Canadian Constitution. But the Canada Health Transfer Accord is coming up for renewal, and that's always a time to try and squeeze more money out of Ottawa for it. The federal government, I don't know why they went to Ottawa for this. The federal government clearly decides these things before anybody gets there. So I'm not really sure what the point of going to Ottawa is. But they're going to do $196 billion over 10 years. That's a $46 billion increase to the baseline that was already slotted for that. That wasn't the interesting parts, though. Smith's interactions with Trudeau were much more interesting, particularly the handshake. That was awkward. Some have said that maybe Trudeau really leaned into it, trying to maybe intimidate her by squeezing her. When you see it zoomed in, there's a very clear white mark surrounded by red where it appears as maybe his thumb was pressing. I don't know. Was this just awkward? You've met people before. You're like, then you go and you get a weird handshake. Do you think it was just an awkward, weird handshake, or was this Trudeau kind of coming in, trying to go for the power dominating handshake over her? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I'm for the dominating. I actually went and have found somebody from Reader's Digest had a great article just a couple of months ago, quoting a personality analysis specialist by the name of Dr. Lillian Glass. And she defined the different kinds of handshakes for us. So this is the dominant handshake. If the person goes in too hard, you never want the other person to feel like you're trying to take the upper hand by forcing their palm up. So when you look at that, I'm sure that Danielle Smith was not trying to show that she was too friendly with Mr. Trudeau. Like, well, I don't know, we have a clip, I think, of.
We're going to show them talking in a moment.
His
Yeah.
predecessor, Rachel Notley, was obviously very, very enthusiastic to meet the.
Well, you remember seeing her looking up,
yes,
lovingly into his eyes.
And there was a terrible moment for Peter Lougheed 40 years ago when he met with Justin Trudeau's father, and they appeared altogether too friendly. So
I'm avoiding making a joke there.
Yeah, you should. And so it would not play well to Premier Smith's base to go in looking like everything was fine and we were just going to have a nice chat and we're super friendly with Mr. Trudeau, because he is somebody who's trying to put us out of business. You want to talk about anti-oil, there's somebody who is self-proclaimed anti-oil and done a lot to bring it about and to destroy the industry here. And so there's no percentage in here. So she was a little hesitant in offering her hand. He sort of grabbed it and did exactly what Dr. Glass says you shouldn't do, squeezed too hard. And I don't know about you, Derek, but I can't remember a time when somebody has shaken my hand upon meeting me for the first time and left a visible white mark where the circulation has been temporarily cut off. Mm-hmm. Clear intimidation tactic, I would say.
Cory, what do you think? Is this was this kind of a dominating intimidation tactic, or did Premier Smith just kind of make awkward contact and he just ended up grabbing around it?
Well, I mean, from what I read into it, and I watched it a number of times and things, as you said, these things are all settled. I mean, this whole affair is a photo op. That's what the whole meeting's about. Premiers meeting premiers, premiers meeting the Prime Minister, getting their pictures. And both Premier Smith and Prime Minister Trudeau wanted two very different pictures to be going out. Prime Minister Trudeau wants to be showing I'm the person who's in charge, but still negotiating in good faith and has a good relationship with every premier, even Premier Smith. Whereas Premier Smith wants to say, well, I'm here because this is my obligation, but I'm not thrilled to be associating with this individual. And I won't let myself be seen with a big grin on my face, shaking hands as my predecessor Notley had, so because those pictures will be rubbed in. Now, what I'm guessing is happening, Premier Smith has shaken thousands and thousands of hands. She knows how to come in for a handshake quickly, clearly, and defined. She didn't want to have a good, solid handshake. And when it became evident to Prime Minister Trudeau that she wasn't coming in well, he grabbed, which was really actually, again, I don't think it was planned aggression, but it was aggression. And he held on so she couldn't pull away. I mean, it wasn't even a handshake. It was a thumb over top odd grasp. I mean, some people are saying it's a Freemason's handshake. I'm not going down that road. I think he just...
That's secret. How would they know?
Unless
they're Freemason.
There we go. Yeah. I didn't think he, again, intended to have that weird, but now once they were locked, now it's time to stare at the cameras no matter what, and he wasn't letting her hand loose. It was just a bizarre thing. I think he was a bit upset that she'd pulled that with him too, and that's part of why he gave that squeeze. And I think in hindsight, he's probably thinking, oh God, I should have known better than that.
I do... I remember, when Kenny and Trudeau got their photo, and I think Kenny got it pretty right. He looked like stern.
Yeah.
It looked like if I don't know, George Bush met Kim Jong-il. Like, fine, we're gonna meet, but like they don't like each other, and I think Kenny got like the photo he was looking for. He was looking stern, and back in the era before we realized it'll just be angry letters sent to Ottawa, it was kind of the photo he was looking for. I'm not sure either of them got the photo they were looking for here. I think it was just awkward and weird.
A bad moment happened.
Speaking of awkward and weird, let's look at this video of this is kind of a new thing. Kind of like a diplomatic meeting. You see this in the White House. The president will have the president of Ukraine over, or the Canadian Prime Minister, UK Prime Minister. Let's look at this video of Justin Trudeau and Danielle Smith sitting down, having some pictures taken of them, just chilling, and remarks from Alberta Premier Danielle Smith.
I'm delighted to be able to have an opportunity to talk about some areas of common interest, maybe some areas of diversion, to see if we can find some common interest. We have, I think, a lot of shared goals in addressing issues of Indigenous health care, mental health, addiction, home care, community-based care as we transform our healthcare system. So I'm pleased that we'll be meeting with all the other premiers today. But of course, I did write a letter to the Prime Minister a couple of weeks ago expressing concern about some of the major initiatives that have been announced without much consultation with Alberta that stand to have a huge impact on our province. The just transition legislation that gives the impression that the energy sector is going to be phased out. It's not going to be phased out. We're transforming away from high intensity emissions to lower emissions. I think we have some shared priorities on that. LNG export to reduce emissions using the green transfer mechanism to get credit here. That would also help British Columbia, working on critical minerals, hydrogen, geothermal, lithium. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to find some common ground. I'm also concerned about the green electricity regulations. Our province has 90% of our electricity grid on natural gas, and so a early phase out of natural gas is just simply not going to result in a reliable and affordable option for our province. And also a proposed emissions cap on the energy sector. We've said very clearly that an aggressive emissions cap, such as was initially proposed, would really be a production cap. Because there isn't a feasible way for us to achieve that within 8 years. So with any luck, we'll find some common ground on some of those issues today, because I think it's going to be important for Alberta and for all of Canada that we need to find common ground so that we can continue to move forward on addressing issues together.
All right. Well, as we saw there, I actually haven't seen this with premiers and the Prime Minister before. Maybe it's been done before, but I've generally only ever seen it at the White House, where they sit together and they answer, and it's kind of like a very casual press conference. It's supposed to, but when you're standing beside the leader you're with here, the opposing leader, you're expected to be kind of in very good, your best manners. Danielle Smith slams on Trudeau. Trudeau has nasty things to say about Smith and Sovereignty Act and stuff. But you're side by side with each other. You're always more friendly to someone in person. That's why everybody's a tough guy behind the wheel of a car, behind a keyboard. Meet him in real life, it's different. But Smith was, trying to walk a fine line here. She's trying to be friendly, be personable with Trudeau, because he's right beside her in the chair. But she's also talking about just transition stuff. But I did notice her language was much softer than it normally is, and I would expect that because. She can't sit, I wouldn't sit here and say, Nigel is, these bloody English bastards. I wouldn't say nasty things in front of you. If I'm going to say nasty things, I'd probably want to say it in my car behind a keyboard, right? It's a little harder face to face.
Get out of reach.
We'll talk about this later.
Yeah.
Because, you know what he says about you?
Oh,
you don't even know.
I saw it scrolled in the washer.
Yeah. So let's start with you, Cory. How well do you think she walked the line on this one? Because it's tough. She's expected to be tough and oppositional with Trudeau, but at the same time, she's sitting beside him. How do you think she handled it? Because it was a bit awkward.
I think she did okay. I mean, that there wasn't anything really resolved or settled, so there weren't big things you could speak to. I mean, they'd made their statements. She wants to look as if she's standing strongly for Alberta, but you still have to be diplomatic. Nobody wants to see her go there and put the finger right into the Prime Minister's eye. I mean, there's no sense bringing on more fight than we've already got.
Well,
we've got plenty of fight.
I think a lot of people do want to see that. I'm not sure. I think a lot of people want to see at least
a certain segment wants to see that, and I wouldn't lose a lot of sleep seeing it. But realistically, if you want to be an effective government and representing the whole province, you still have to be diplomatic. And she did what she could with it, as did Trudeau. I mean, he didn't bring up start a fight while he was there either, which I don't think would have served either of them well. So it was kind of par for the course for what we would expect, aside from the handshake, which shows just how much underlying tension there really is there.
I don't know. How do you think she handled it, Nigel? Was it because it was awkward?
No, it was. Well, look, obviously, you save your strongest arguments and your most vociferous statements for behind closed doors when only the staff see it. It's not recorded. It would not have played well in the rest of the country. I mean, the national press is just waiting for a chance to jump on Danielle Smith and say, well, she's look at her, she's just a something from Alberta, and we don't need to pay this person any respect or take her seriously. You walk in there with your boxing gloves on, that's the treatment that she would have got. I thought that she laid out the Alberta's position very clearly. He said that he would look at it. That's the kind of exchange that you would expect from that sort of an occasion. The fighting is going to come later. No, she's a pro. She handled it very well.
Well, just talk quickly about the healthcare deal. I don't know. You can't really call it a deal or
It's
a
not
court.
a deal yet.
Premiers don't have any say. It's kind of like equalization. They can lobby for these things publicly and privately, but at the end of the day, it's the federal government. I was surprised not to see much from Alberta and Saskatchewan against increasing the healthcare transfer, because people don't understand this. These dollars are not equal. Now, they're not as bad as equalization because we do get some. Alberta gets some, Saskatchewan gets some, but it's not on a per capita basis. But taxes to Ottawa are not paid on a per capita basis. They're based on our incomes. And our businesses pay more in tax than places outside of Alberta and lesser extent Saskatchewan. And our people pay more income tax than people outside of Alberta and a lesser degree Saskatchewan. So we're paying way more per capita in taxes to Ottawa than Ottawa kicks some of the money back to the provinces per capita. Also, we have a younger, healthier population than most other provinces, and Saskatchewan to an extent as well. So the fact that there is any healthcare dollars going from Alberta or Saskatchewan to Ottawa and then back to the provinces is never in our interest. I don't recall seeing Scott Moe, I don't recall seeing Danielle Smith saying, cut healthcare transfers, because that would have kept more net wealth in Alberta and Saskatchewan than doing this. I don't know. So this seems actually to be a big loss for Alberta, that even though Alberta and Saskatchewan get more money, net based on what we're paying in, we're getting less. Seems to me this is a loss.
You could sure argue it that way, but I don't like. There's 8 other premiers and some provincial territorial leaders there who would have just blown it open if.
Well, they would have been very angry with
if they say
the
give
Western
us less, and it's not like. Let's put this in perspective for the numbers. This is $46 billion that the Prime Minister has laid out there over 10 years. So that's $4.6 billion a year divided between 12 jurisdictions. 13, I beg your pardon, you're right. That works out to something like it's about 1% increase, which is not even worth fighting over. So Alberta presently spends $22 billion a year on health. That's more than a third of the provincial budget. So this is not going to change the way anybody lives. So I don't see that there's a lot of incentive for Alberta or any of the provinces, frankly, to step up and say, yeah, give it to us, and we'll do whatever you want. Because don't forget, the deal here is that if you take the money, you also are signing on for your full support for the Canada Health Act, which is translated in Ottawaese as no private health care, where that is actually the solution. 60%, according to a recent poll, 60% of Canadians are now prepared to say, as long as it's a single government payer, let's by all means use anybody who's got a surgery and a clinic and who can push people through. This is actually what the government of Alberta is presently doing, is they've expanded, I believe, 3,000 extra surgical procedures, mostly for orthopedics. These are the people who've been waiting years, not months. This is the route forward. If they take the money, that is going to be harder to do. So I can readily appreciate, well, they just sat there, let the Prime Minister say his piece. And when we get back to Alberta, when we get back to Toronto, when we get back to Regina, we're going to move ahead with our solutions to fix our problems, not Ottawa.
Cory, do you think, so Nigel's talking about, this money comes with strings attached from Ottawa, even though the federal government has no role whatsoever for healthcare in the Constitution. the Supreme Court of Canada, throughout the history of Canada, has much more often than not sided with not just federal power, but federal executive power. And with that comes the so-called spending power, which was not something granted to the federal government under the Constitution, just something given to the federal government constitutionally by the Supreme Court, where, yeah, Ottawa is not allowed to control healthcare directly, but they can indirectly control it by putting out money with strings attached to it, like it was foreign aid, essentially. This new money comes with strings attached, just as all the existing money in the pot comes with strings attached. But, the premiers were all saying they wanted more money. Do you think it was possible for, say, Smith and Moe, if they wanted to politically, to say, no, stop giving us healthcare money? Or would that just create too many enemies with the other provinces and isolate them? Because clearly they'd probably just be the two of them.
And not just with the provinces, but with their own voters. Like what you spoke of before with how it works, if the provinces declined it, yes, technically it would mean more for us, but try and sell that to the person when Rachel Notley's up there saying they're passing up on healthcare dollars while our patients are waiting in waiting lists. Like, it would be very difficult to sell. It's kind of like you say, if you're explaining, you're losing. And, you had to speak for a couple of minutes to explain how that works. And of course, but so politically, it would be a terrible stance to take, a very difficult one anyways. As Nigel said too, the amount isn't that high. Where the battles will go, there are strings, but the only string, and there hasn't been a lot of talk about that though, very directly, as much as Jagmeet Singh's been demanding it and others to say crack down on Ford or Smith for expanding things. All Trudeau kept saying was it's got to stay within the Health Act. And if you look within the Health Act, there's nothing stopping private provision, actually. That's just a matter of, interpretation at best.
It's only private payment that's
yes,
illegal, which still sucks.
Which hasn't been happening. So I didn't see some of the clashes I thought might come. I thought Trudeau actually has been showing a little more pragmatism on that front lately. He's been, I think it's because of his close relationship with Ford, and Ford's moving that route. He doesn't want to get into the fight in Ontario right now. I remember the 90s well enough, where Jean Chrétien was battling with Klein over private MRIs, and he was cutting health transfers because we were doing that out here.
And remember, I think my memory is pretty foggy, but Chrétien actually flew somewhere and went to a private clinic for private health care while he condemned Klein for allowing any private health care whatsoever.
It wouldn't surprise me. But that was some very distinct battles between, and I didn't see any of that sort of rhetoric coming out of this meeting. Mm-hmm. I don't think any of the leaders are really spoiling for a scrap on this front. They want more money. Every leader always wants more money, but they're not looking for a battle right now.
Corey, maybe they should just take what's offered and go home. It's not as if the federal government has got such wonderful finances that they can afford to give the provinces all that they would like if they had.
No,
well, that was, just really quickly, the federal conservative critique of this, so lame. It was so lame. They just said, they weren't saying necessarily that the federal government should have spent more money, but they were saying, well, Trudeau spent the cupboards bare, so there is no more money. Okay, yeah, Trudeau did spend the cupboards bare, but take a firm position. Should the federal government be involved in areas outside of its jurisdiction or not? Jagmeet Singh is at least consistent. Yes, it should be. It should absolutely be outside of its jurisdiction. Federal, the NDP's policy for a long time has been more or less Canada should be as close to a unitary, centralized state as possible, with the exception of Quebec, which gets to do whatever it wants. So the NDP have been consistent, but the Conservatives are just kind of sucking and blowing on this one. Just, if you're not going to have a good, reasoned, thoughtful criticism of the government, shut up and don't make a criticism. There's enough to criticize the government on. Speaking of sucking and blowing, Joe Biden and the balloon.
Nice.
How do you like that segue? Eh? So, this is not breaking news. You've all seen it. The Chinese spy balloon that made its way over somewhere, I guess, around the Pacific, and gently drifted all the way across America. And, by the time we found out about it, I'm sure the American military and intelligence establishment had probably known about it for a long time. By the time we find out about it, it's old news. And, the press asked President Biden, aren't you going to shoot this thing down? Like, it's spying on us. I'm not sure we could actually see it with the naked eye because it was pretty high up there, but it was a balloon. And there's no. And they said, little safety reasons. We can't fall. It's over like Dakota.
Yeah.
You know how many people are in Dakota? Not a lot. the chances of it falling and hitting someone are pretty friggin' small.
Plus, you get to pick your spot too. You don't have to do it over Bismarck.
No,
You
no,
know.
no. There's places to do it, and you could use the right kind of warheads to make sure that it's fairly small things that fall. Say, okay, everybody in I don't know, Milwaukee, stay inside between 2 and 3 o'clock Tuesday. There'll be raining Chinese spare parts, and use a warhead that's not going to leave big chunks. And there's ways to do it. Use some overkill to pretty much incinerate the thing. They said, no, it was a safety thing. And they just let this spy balloon drift all the way over America until it was off the coast of the Atlantic from Carolina before they finally downed the thing. We'll start with you, Cory. What conceivable reason can you think of? Because safety doesn't really seem to be it until you're literally over the eastern seaboard where it's densely populated. It doesn't seem to make any sense.
I can think of one potential one, and to play a bit of devil's advocate. I mean, this thing was just made for memes, so it's hard to there were so many humorous things about it, but this is actually quite serious on a lot of levels. I mean, the basis, why would China need to put a spy balloon over us when we can go on Google Earth and you can tell what makes your neighbor's car is on their driveway? You don't need to float a balloon over North America to see what's going on anymore. But something that China was testing not too long ago, and that was reported on, was actually using high-altitude balloons to deliver hypersonic missiles. And I could be just going off on a stretch here, but I mean, if they're concerned that there are ordnance on that balloon, then there very well could have been something dangerous on that if they did shoot it down.
But if there's ordnance on the balloon, it's still better to blow it up in the air before it can launch.
Well, there's that too. But I mean, do you want to be the one who cut the string and it does land next to Bismarck? Or I'm just, again, throwing out as what
pieces of missiles came out, it still would have been a lot worse if those missiles were launched and hit targets.
Yeah, I'm just guessing perhaps some of the reason for reticence was that they just weren't too sure exactly what is on this darn thing. And it could cause more damage than they're trying to solve if there was something aboard it. Other than that, I mean, yeah, it's caused a political crap show that they're still enduring right now with people saying, why did you let that thing go across? I mean, it went over our houses. It should have been dealt with long before it got here.
So, Nigel, this is, it's pretty undeniably, I think, humiliating for America. They've got the greatest military force that has ever existed. They even have Space Force now.
Yep.
They've even got Space Force. I mean, that was a real
look down and zap them.
They should have called it Starfleet or something. They borrowed the Starfleet symbol for it. They ripped it right off. But it was humiliating for America that they just allowed this to drift right over them, and they could have shot this down with their eyes closed with the kind of technology they've got. Do you think there'll be any kind of political ramification for this for the Biden administration?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Republicans will ride it, and they should. But, the question nobody is asking is, why didn't Canada shoot it down? And
with what?
Well, we have CF-18s, we have Sidewinder
I don't
missiles.
even think they get that high.
Yeah, well,
those things are like almost twice as old as I am. I mean, not that old, but like they're well older than I'm old.
Service ceiling for a F-18 is 50,000 feet. This thing was floating around about 60, which is less than 2 miles. The range of a Sidewinder is up to 20.
It was over American airspace. We couldn't have done it without knowing
it. It's over Canada for some time.
Yeah, it didn't
was it over Canada?
Yeah.
Okay, but did we even know it?
Well, that would be a good question to ask the Prime Minister. But you're talking about why this ever happened. The Chinese just get a kick out of poking the United States. So, yeah, we floated a balloon, and they didn't have the balls to shoot the thing down for a week.
Well, I would do it again if I was them. Like I like teasing my kids. If I tease my wife. I tease people. I tease you guys. Some of you I tease more than others because some of you I get a better rise out of.
Honestly, picture yourself out in your back 40. You've got a double gauge, a double barrel 12 gauge shotgun, and there's somebody's full drone going overhead.
Your neighbor keeps sending
You think maybe you would blast the thing out of the sky on principle because they shouldn't be doing it. You don't need to have a terribly sophisticated view of international relations to say that that is a hostile act, to float a balloon across your territory without sort of saying, well, it's this kind of a mission or it's that kind of a mission. Is it okay with you if you do that? If you just send the thing, that's hostility. So, all right, if the Americans don't shoot it down over Alaska, let's us shoot it down over British Columbia. Load the buggery.
Doubtful Canada even knew about it. I guess it's all a part of NORAD, but I doubt Canada knew or had much of a capability to deal with it.
I hope you're wrong about the capability, but anyway.
When I was a kid, I wanted to join the Navy and be a submarine captain. I gave up that dream when I realized Canada had no submarines, and we still don't have functional submarines. So I made a good career choice based on that. And I even thought about the Air Force, and I thought, these planes are older than me. Yeah. And I think they're going to continue to be older than me for a long time.
Well, yeah. I mean, as Nigel said, too, though, I mean, that's, China likes giving the finger to the West, and that was a great big white middle finger.
We didn't disappoint.
No.
We were totally lame.
I can imagine what the reports are over in China. They're laughing their heads off as they watch.
Oh, I would be. Yeah. We floated a balloon over them, and China didn't even make an attempt to shoot it until it floated past their borders after going the whole way. I'd be like, they're not very serious people. We can continue to poke them.
For all the reasons you gave, there's nothing they could have found out with that balloon that they couldn't have got off the internet.
No. So it was purposeful.
There must have been something to it other than just pissing us off. I don't know. Okay, well, if you want to continue to get pissed off, make sure you subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. I know most of you are watching us on different video streaming services, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble. If you're watching us on Facebook, on YouTube, you should really watch us on a better platform than YouTube, because most of our stuff doesn't get to go up there because it gets banned anyway. But you should definitely subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app so you can listen to us while you're driving to work in the morning, driving home in the evening, that kind of thing. Very relaxing. Listen, Corey's silky voice.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, make sure you subscribe right now. Go to westernstandard.news, click on membership. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year to get you past the paywall and get you unlimited access to all Western Standard content. We need you to support us because we refuse to take the government's federal bailout money. Without you, we couldn't continue to do what we're doing. So thank you all for joining us, and Corey and Nigel. It's been a wonderful time.
Always a pleasure.
Always fun.
All right. I'm going to float on out of here. Thank you very much, and God bless.
The current Lethbridge feed grain price is read as follows. Cash barley's at $4.18, feed wheat's at $4.36, and corn's trading at $4.40 per metric ton. In the milling wheat markets, March Minneapolis futures increased 6 3/4 cents at $9.24, with local hard red spring bits for March movement at $11.35 per bushel. In the oil seeds, nearby canola futures are down $6.50 at $8.26, with delivered values for February movement at $18.51 per bushel. In the pulse markets, nearby red lentils remain at 30 cents a pound, and yellow peas are holding at $12.50 per bushel. In the cattle markets, April live cattle gained 2 cents at $163.62 per 100 weight. For more information on grain marketing, call me at 403-394-1711. I'm Sean Smith at Marketplace Commodities, accurate real-time marketing information and pricing options.
Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. To become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny. You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99